So, what if I told you that your entire life, your achievements, your dreams, your ambitions, your meaning and definition of success wasn't actually ever yours? That from the moment that you stepped into a classroom, you were being trained to seek meaning, approval, and success from somewhere else. And that even now, long after school is over, you're still trapped in that system. Now, I know this because I've lived it, and it all sort of made sense to me when my dream turned into a nightmare. I think I'd done everything right. My parents were immigrants. They worked really hard to get us set up in the country, and I tried to work just as hard. And my goal was to get into a great business school. And so I worked hard. I had the grades, I had the discipline, I had the drive. I thought this was my ticket to success, to finally making it. But I remember that from the moment I arrived, something just felt off. The people around me, most of them had come from really rich backgrounds. They moved through life with a different style, with an ease that I just couldn't understand. They wore expensive clothes, jewelry. They just lived a lot more lavishly. They weren't just confident, they were just playing an entirely different game. I couldn't even understand it. Their status, their connections, their unspoken rules. I wasn't part of it. And because of that, I just didn't exist to them. And no amount of hard work, no amount of effort could ever cross that boundary. Because at first I did think that if I just tried a little bit harder, maybe if I networked more, played along, I'd belong. But in a couple of weeks, I realized that that's just not true. It wasn't about school. It wasn't going to happen. I spent the rest of my time in business school just doing my work and building a smaller group of friends who were sort of like me, who felt similarly. But a part of me kept asking for and hoping that I'd belong with this bigger group, the more popular group, the group that seemed to have it all figured out. Years later, even now, I sometimes look back at that time and I wonder why I felt so small at that time, why I needed to fit in so badly. And I realize now that I'd actually been trained to do that. I was trained to seek approval. I was trained to fit into that hierarchy. I was trained to define my worth by someone else's standards. I think what I've learned is that business school wasn't just about education, it was a social sorting system. And I think the worst part of this is that I saw that this system didn't stop after graduation. Now, I've been out of school for a long time. I've seen it continue throughout careers, relationships, social circles. This is how the world works. We're all trying to fit into this standardized system, and we're unhappy for it. And the reality is that we are never going to fit in. I think this standardization thing is a trap. Because if you think about it, from the moment that we take our first test, we are measured, we are ranked, we're categorized. From the day we walk into our school, what clothes we wear, we're categorized. SATs, GPA, standardized tests, these numbers decide our worth. But what are they actually measuring? Is it intelligence? Is it potential? Now, my wife and I benefited a lot from being on the higher end of this bell curve. I knew how to get good grades. We played the game really, really well. As an aside, I remember my one and only attempt at giving a standardized test. I grew up in Canada. It was absolutely soul crushing, so I feel a lot of weird feelings about people who take these standardized tests their entire life. But anyways, I think what I've learned is that these tests aren't about intelligence. They're about conformity. In fact, it's not just about that one standardized test. The whole schooling system is about standardization. It's about conformity. Conform to the system. We are standardized with this process. We are taught to think of ourselves by our scores, our GPAs, our resumes, our LinkedIn profiles. We learn to obey, to follow the rules. What about those who don't? Well, they get disciplined, right? They're rebels. They push back. They break, and eventually they end up being resentful and destructive. I think the question I think about a lot is that where did we start to believe that this was actually a good thing, a good way of actually organizing society, a good way to put a kid through, a good way to lead all of us? Why did we accept that standardization, being placed on a bell curve, was the path to success, to happiness? That scoring a perfect 1400 SAT score was proof that you are intelligent, that you have made it. And what is this competition all about? This bell curve, you against other people. What does it actually mean? What is the reward? Why are we being pit against one another? I think that these victories are actually empty. They make us perfect at being standardized. The higher your score, you get a perfect score. Great, you're perfect at being standardized. And I think the greatest danger is that we start thinking like everyone else. We learn to define intelligence, our potential, our abilities in one very narrow way. We internalize the idea that to be valuable, we must fit into this type of mold. And no amount of other extracurriculars or personal statements that you try to use to pad up your story can change that core conditioning. I think the real tragedy is this, that we learn to see ourselves through the lens of how we compare ourselves to others. We enter this lifelong competition, and it can be through test scores. It happens with careers, your job title, your salaries, your social standing, the size of your house. Even when we don't know, even when we know this doesn't bring us happiness, we stay trapped in this cycle. For a long time, I blamed myself for not living up to what I was told was success. And that blame kept me trapped. I think I make these videos today as a way to deprogram myself, to untangle the web of conditioning that told me that I wasn't enough, that my worth was tied to a number, a job title, a salary amount. I think we're waking up. We are becoming disenfranchised. More people than ever are quitting this definition of success, this aggressive drive towards standardization. But I think realizing this isn't enough. I think if we're out of the school system ourselves, we need to unlearn this programming. And the first step to breaking free is to see the conditioning for what it is. The system wants you to keep playing by its rules, right? It wants you standardized. It wants you conforming. It wants to keep you on this bell curve. It wants you to measure yourself by external benchmarks, to keep searching outside of yourself for meaning. But what if you stopped? What if you started asking, what do I actually want? What matters to me beyond what I've been told? I'm 35 years old, and I find this to be a very difficult question. This isn't easy. It's uncomfortable. I don't have any experience asking myself this. But I think on the other side of this discomfort is something powerful. A life that belongs to you. And I think the world wants this from us as well. So I hope this resonates with you. What has been your experience of breaking out of this conditioning? Are you still conditioned? Do you still have these sorts of ideas come into your head that, oh, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. I don't fit into this bell curve of success, of being normal. I'd love to leave a comment below. I'd love to know your stories so that I can continue making these videos. I'll see you next time. Thanks.